At 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday night, 89-year-old Mildred Jenkins lay paralyzed in her bed, her fingers trembling just inches from her phone. The pain shooting through her lower back was unlike anything she'd experienced in 4 decades as a registered nurse. One touch would connect her to 911. One call would bring paramedics rushing to her small farmhouse in rural Kentucky. But something stopped her cold. A memory. A voice from 70 years ago, whispering words she thought she'd forgotten forever. Before I tell you what happened next, and how a paste made from ingredients sitting right in Mildred's kitchen cabinet saved her from a lifetime of chronic pain, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. What you're about to hear could change everything you thought you knew about back pain relief. Trust me, you don't want to miss a single word of this. Mildred had always been the strong one. The one her neighbors called when their children ran fevers. The one who delivered babies during blizzards when doctors couldn't make it through the snow. For 43 years, she'd walked hospital corridors, lifted patients, bent over bedsides, and never once complained about her back. But that night, something snapped. Not literally, but the kind of snap that comes after decades of wear and tear finally catch up with you. She'd been gardening that afternoon, pulling weeds from her tomato patch like she'd done every summer for the past 20 years. Nothing unusual, nothing that should have triggered this kind of agony. The pain started as a whisper around dinner time, a small tightness right above her tailbone. By bedtime, it was shouting. By 3 a.m., it was screaming so loud she couldn't think straight. Mildred tried everything she knew from her nursing days. She shifted positions, pressed her knees to her chest, tried to breathe through it like she'd coached thousands of patients to do. Nothing worked. The pain was like a red-hot poker pressed against her spine, radiating down her legs and up into her shoulders. Her phone sat on the nightstand, glowing with that familiar blue light. Emergency contacts programmed and ready. Her daughter Sarah lived 2 states away, but the paramedics could be there in 15 minutes. She'd seen this scenario play out hundreds of times in the emergency room. Elderly patient, severe back pain, probable hospitalization, weeks of tests, medications with side effects worse than the original problem. But as her finger hovered over those 3 numbers that would change everything, something extraordinary happened. A memory surfaced from so deep in her past, she almost didn't recognize. Fit at first, she was 9 years old again, standing in her great-grandmother's kitchen. Great-grandmother Sarah, who everyone called Granny Sarah, was Cherokee through and through. Never set foot in a hospital her entire 94 years of life. Never took a pill from a pharmacy. Never complained about pain, even when arthritis gnarled her fingers so badly she could barely hold a spoon. Mildred remembered watching those weathered hands mixing something in a wooden bowl. Fair paste that smelled like earth and fire and healing all rolled into one. She remembered Granny Sarah's voice, soft but certain. "Child, the land gives us everything we need. The white man's medicine treats symptoms. Our medicine heals the root." Lying. There in her bed 70 years later, Mildred could almost smell that paste again, could almost feel Granny Sarah's hands working magic into her own small back after she'd fallen from the apple tree behind the house. But here's what made that memory even more powerful. Mildred had written down Granny Sarah's recipe, not as a nurse, but as a scared 12-year-old girl who knew her great-grandmother wouldn't be around forever. She'd copied every ingredient, every measurement, every instruction into a small notebook that she'd carried with her through nursing school, through marriage, through raising 3 children, through 43 years of helping others heal. That notebook was sitting in her kitchen drawer right now, had been sitting there for decades, forgotten beneath utility bills and grocery lists and all the accumulated paperwork of a long life. The pain was still there, still fierce, but now something else was there too. Hope, and something even stronger than hope. A connection to something ancestral, something that had been working long before hospitals and prescription bottles and MRI machines. What Mildred didn't know, as she slowly eased herself out of bed and began the painful journey to her kitchen, was that modern science was finally catching up to what Granny Sarah had known all along, that the ingredients in that simple paste contained compounds that could actually outperform many over-the-counter pain medications. That the wisdom passed down through generations of Cherokee healers was about to meet the validation of 21st century research. The kitchen felt different at 3:30 in the morning. Quieter, more sacred somehow. Mildred moved slowly, one hand pressed against the wall for support, the other trailing along the familiar countertops she'd touched thousands of times before. The drawer stuck a little, the way it always did. Inside, beneath a stack of warranty cards and expired coupons, her fingers found the familiar spiral binding of that old notebook. The cover was faded now, the corners soft with age, but when she opened it, there was her 12-year-old handwriting, careful and precise, preserving something precious. Granny Sarah's Back Paste for Deep Pain, the title read, underlined twice for emphasis. As her eyes adjusted to the words, the memories came flooding back with startling clarity. Granny Sarah hadn't just been mixing ingredients that day, she'd been passing down knowledge that went back generations. Knowledge that had kept her people strong and healthy when they had nothing but the land to rely on. Granny Sarah had learned the recipe from her own grandmother, who'd learned it from hers, in an unbroken chain stretching back to a time when Cherokee healers were revered for their ability to read the language of plants. Each woman had added her own understanding, refined the measurements, deepened the wisdom. The ingredients were simple. So simple that Mildred had to read the list twice to believe it. Turmeric powder, fresh ginger root, coconut oil, a tiny pinch of cayenne pepper, raw honey from local bees. Things that had been sitting in her spice cabinet and pantry for months, waiting. But Granny Sarah's notes told the real story. Next to each ingredient in that same careful 12-year-old handwriting were the reasons why. The wisdom behind the recipe. Turmeric, the notes read, is the golden healer. Granny Sarah says it fights the fire inside that makes us hurt. She says the old ones called it the spice that makes bones sing again. Ginger is the warmer. It wakes up the blood and tells it to carry healing where it's needed most. Granny Sarah rubs it between her palms first, says you have to wake up the medicine inside. Coconut oil carries the others deep, like a river carrying medicine to places cream can't reach. Has to be the kind that's solid when it's cool, liquid when it's warm, like our bodies. Cayenne pepper, just a tiny bit, opens the doors in the skin so healing can get through. Granny Sarah says it's like knocking on the door of pain and telling it to move along. Honey seals it all together, makes the skin soft and ready to receive. But it has to be honey from bees that know the land, not store honey that's been heated and lost its power. Standing in her kitchen, reading these words by the light of her refrigerator, Mildred felt something she hadn't experienced in decades. A connection to something larger than herself, larger than her pain. A thread reaching back through generations of women who had faced suffering and found ways to transform it. But there was something else in those notes, something that made her hands tremble as she gathered the ingredients. Instructions that showed Granny Sarah understood things about healing that even Mildred's nursing education hadn't fully grasped. Mix with wooden spoon, never metal. Metal confuses the medicine. Warm the oil first, just body temperature, so it welcomes the others. Add turmeric slow, stirring always clockwise, same direction as the sun. Ginger comes last when everything else is friends. Apply when moon is dark, pain is strongest. Spread thin, like butter on warm bread. Cover with cloth that's been washed. In rainwater if you have it, regular water if you don't. The paste knows the difference, but it won't refuse to work. As Mildred began to warm the coconut oil in a small saucepan, she realized she was participating in something ancient. Something that connected her not just to Granny Sarah, but to countless women who had stood in their own kitchens mixing healing into paste, refusing to surrender to pain. The oil melted slowly, turning from solid white to clear liquid, releasing. A scent that reminded her of summer rain and possibility. She added the turmeric, watching it transform the oil into liquid gold, stirring clockwise just as the notes instructed, feeling foolish and faithful at the same time. The ginger came last, freshly grated, releasing its sharp, clean scent into the mixture. A tiny pinch of cayenne, so small she could barely see it, but enough to make the paste warm and alive in the spoon. Finally, honey, thick and amber, swirling through the mixture like sweetness threading through strength. What she held in her hands looked like nothing special. A small bowl of golden paste that smelled like her childhood and promises. But as she prepared to test 70 years of forgotten wisdom against the worst pain of her life, Mildred had no idea she was about to discover something that would change not just her night, but her understanding of what real healing could look like. What happened next would have amazed Granny Sarah, though maybe not surprised her. As Mildred carefully applied the warm paste to her lower back, she was unknowingly triggering a cascade of biological responses that modern researchers are only beginning to understand. Let me break down exactly what each ingredient was doing, because this isn't just folklore. This is sophisticated medicine disguised as simple kitchen remedies. The turmeric, that golden powder that forms the base of the paste, contains a compound called curcumin. Now, curcumin has been studied in over 3,000 peer-reviewed papers, and what researchers have found is remarkable. It works as a natural COX-2 inhibitor, the same pathway targeted by prescription anti-inflammatory drugs, but without the stomach irritation and side effects. But here's what Granny Sarah knew intuitively, that science is just proving. Curcumin doesn't just mask pain. It actually interrupts the inflammatory cascade at the cellular level. When you have back pain, your body is essentially on fire internally. Inflammatory molecules are flooding the area, causing swelling, heat, and that deep, persistent ache that can drive you to desperation. Curcumin works like a molecular fire department, not just putting out the flames, but preventing them from spreading to surrounding tissue. And because Mildred was applying it topically, directly to the source of pain, she was delivering concentrated healing exactly where it was needed most. The ginger was working too, and in ways that would fascinate any physical therapist. Fresh. Ginger contains compounds called gingerols and shogals that have a unique ability to improve circulation right at the skin level. As Mildred rubbed that paste into her back, the ginger was literally waking up blood vessels that had been constricted by pain and inflammation. Think of it this way. When you're in severe pain, your body naturally tenses up, reducing blood flow to the affected area. Less blood flow means less oxygen, fewer nutrients, and slower healing. The ginger was reversing that process, opening up those tiny capillaries and inviting fresh, oxygenated blood to flood the area with healing resources. But the real genius of Granny Sarah's recipe was in the delivery system. That coconut oil wasn't just a carrier. Coconut oil has a unique molecular structure that allows it to penetrate skin more effectively than most commercial creams. It's rich in medium-chain fatty acids that can actually escort other compounds through the skin barrier and into deeper tissues. Modern pharmaceutical companies spend millions trying to develop transdermal delivery systems that work half as well as coconut oil does naturally. Granny Sarah had figured this out through generations of trial and observation, understanding that the right oil could carry medicine places that pills and injections often can't reach. The tiny pinch of cayenne pepper was perhaps the most sophisticated element of all. Cayenne contains capsaicin, the compound that gives peppers their heat. When applied topically, capsaicin does something remarkable. It depletes substance P, a neurotransmitter responsible for sending pain signals to the brain. In effect, that little bit of cayenne was short-circuiting Mildred's pain pathways, not by numbing them, but by exhausting the chemical messengers that carry pain signals. It's the same principle used in prescription capsaicin patches that cost hundreds of dollars and require a doctor's prescription. And the honey? Raw, local honey is nature's perfect anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial agent. It contains enzymes that reduce swelling and compounds that prevent infection. But more than that, it acts as a humectant, drawing moisture from the air and keeping the other ingredients active on the skin for hours. As Mildred lay back down, the paste working its ancient magic, her body was experiencing what researchers now call synergistic healing. Each ingredient was amplifying the effects of the others, creating a therapeutic effect greater than the sum of its parts. Within 20 minutes, something remarkable began to happen. The fierce, stabbing pain that had paralyzed her began to shift, not disappear entirely, but change character. The sharp edges softened. The constant throbbing eased to a manageable ache. For the first time in hours, Mildred could take a deep breath without wincing. She could shift positions without crying out. Most importantly, she could feel hope returning, replacing the desperation that had been consuming her just an hour before. But the paste was just the beginning of what Granny Sarah's wisdom had to offer. Those carefully preserved notes contained instructions for enhancing the treatment, ways to support the healing from the inside out. Drink willow bark tea while the paste works, the notes read. The trees give us their pain medicine too. Steep 1 teaspoon in hot water, add honey to make it kind to the stomach. Willow bark, Mildred realized, was the original source of aspirin, but unlike synthetic aspirin, willow bark contains natural compounds that protect the stomach lining, while delivering anti-inflammatory effects. If pain is deep and old, another note read, make ginger tea every morning. Fresh root, sliced thin, steeped until the water turns golden. Drink warm, drink faithful. Ginger teaches the body to heal from inside. What Granny Sarah had understood, and what modern research now confirms, is that chronic pain requires a multi-layered approach. The paste addressed the immediate inflammation and pain at the source. The willow bark tea provided systemic anti-inflammatory support. The daily ginger tea worked to improve circulation and reduce overall inflammation throughout the body. As dawn began to break outside Mildred's bedroom window, she realized she had experienced something profound. Not just pain relief, but a reconnection to a way of healing that honored both the wisdom of generations and the intelligence of her own body. What she couldn't have known, as she finally drifted off to sleep with the paste still warm on her skin, was that her healing journey was just beginning. The paste had given her back her night. The wisdom behind it was about to give her back her life. 3 days later, Mildred was back in her garden, not just standing in it, but actually kneeling between the tomato plants, her hands deep in the rich Kentucky soil, moving without pain. For the first time in months, the paste had worked that first night, but what happened over the following days was even more remarkable. Each evening, she prepared a fresh batch using Granny Sarah's recipe, refining her technique, learning to read her body's responses. Each morning she woke with a little more mobility, a little less stiffness, a little more hope. But the real transformation went deeper than physical healing. For the first time since Granny Sarah's death 70 years ago, Mildred felt truly connected to her Cherokee heritage, not as a distant memory or family story, but as a living source of wisdom and strength. She began to understand that Granny Sarah's recipes weren't just about treating symptoms, they were about restoring balance, honoring the body's natural ability to heal, working with natural processes instead of against them. The notebook contained other treasures too, a tea blend for restful sleep made with chamomile, lemon balm, and a pinch of lavender, a tincture for morning stiffness using apple cider, vinegar, honey, and cinnamon, a compress for swollen joints using green tea and Epsom salt. Each recipe came with the same careful notes, the same respect for ingredients, the same understanding that healing is as much about intention and gratitude as it is about chemistry. Mildred started sharing these remedies with her neighbors, the way Granny Sarah had shared with her community decades ago. Mrs. Peterson next door found relief from her arthritis with the morning ginger tea. Old Frank down the road discovered that the willow bark tea eased his chronic hip pain better than anything his doctor had prescribed. Word spread the way it does in small communities, not through advertising or social media, but through the quiet testimony of people whose lives had been changed by simple, effective healing. But perhaps the most profound change was in Mildred herself. At 89, she had discovered that she wasn't just a retired nurse. She was a keeper of ancient wisdom, a bridge between old ways and new understanding, a living testament to the power of natural healing. 6 months later, Mildred's back pain was a memory, not because she'd masked it or managed it, but because she'd addressed its root causes using methods that had been tested not in laboratories, but in the real world, by generations of people who understood that the human body is designed to heal itself when given the right support. She still had that notebook, but now it was accompanied by others, notes from her own experiments, improvements to ancient recipes, new combinations that honored the old wisdom while embracing what she'd learned in her nursing career. The night she almost called 911 had become the night she reclaimed her heritage and her health. The pace that saved her back had opened a door to a way of living that was richer, more connected, and infinitely more hopeful than anything she could have imagined. Here's what I want you to understand. Mildred's story isn't unique because she experienced a miracle. It's unique because she was brave enough to trust wisdom that our modern world has forgotten. Brave enough to try something simple when complex solutions had failed her. The ingredients for Granny Sarah's paste are probably sitting in your kitchen right now. The knowledge is here, shared freely the way it was always meant to be shared. The only question is whether you'll be brave enough to try it. If this story touched something deep inside you, if you recognized yourself in Mildred's pain or found hope in her healing, I need you to do 3 things for me. First, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. There are more stories like this one, more forgotten wisdom waiting to be rediscovered, more simple solutions hiding in plain sight. Second, give this video a thumbs up if it brought you value. Your likes tell me that these stories matter, that this wisdom deserves to be preserved and shared. And third, leave a comment below. Tell me about your own experience with back pain. Share your family's remedies. Let me know if you try Granny Sarah's paste and how it works for you. Your story might be the one that changes someone else's life, because that's how real healing spreads. Not through advertising or prescriptions, but through people sharing what works. Person to person, heart to heart, the way it's always been done. The wisdom is here. The ingredients are available. The only thing missing is your willingness to trust in something simple, something ancient, something true. Your back pain doesn't have to be a life sentence. Your healing doesn't have to come from a pharmacy. Sometimes, the most powerful medicine is the wisdom that's been waiting patiently in your own kitchen, in your own heritage, in your own willingness to try something that connects you to generations of healers who understood that the earth provides everything we need. The question isn't whether natural healing works. The question is whether you're ready to experience it for yourself.